Good afternoon, all. Am I audible? And can you see the slides I shared? Okay, fine, fine. So today we'll start one of the last point from unit number 2, and that is the scheduling, and more specifically CPU scheduling. Okay. Now I'm going to have one quick poll. Yes, respond to this. CPU scheduling refers to which type of scheduler? Short term, long term, or medium term? Last 15 seconds. Let's see the results. Today, I think attendance is bit less. Just 88 students are there. Fine. Out of 88, 29 have not responded. 29 says it is a short term. 21 says it is long term. And 9 says it is a medium term. So the correct answer is a short term. Because anyways, we are assigning CPU here. So CPU scheduling refers to short-term scheduler. Right. That correct answer is short-term. Fine. So let us start with today's topic. With discuss few basic concepts of scheduling and what are the criteria used for the scheduling algorithms, or rather I can say on what parameters scheduling algorithms are assessed. Then we'll see different scheduling algorithms, even their evaluation also. If there is a single processor, what happens? If multiple processors are there, then what happens? And we'll go with few operating system examples with respect to scheduling. Okay, these are the objectives to introduce CPU scheduling, and see one of the basis for multi-program operating system is scheduling. Okay, because when we say multi-programmed operating system, please again don't get confused with multiprocessing where multiple cores are there. It could be single core or multiple core, but multiple programs are possible. That we already saw That is difference between the concurrency and the parallelism. Okay. Anyways, we are going to see so many algorithms and we'll try to evaluate those also with few examples. Now, very first thing is, again, let us start with program, which is executable file, which is passive entity on disk, loaded into the memory by operating system. It becomes process. Now, whatever task assigned to the process is broadly categorized in two things. One is called as a CPU burst and one is called as IO burst. Where CPU burst refers to actual task for the processor, right? So now if you see here, for example, instruction something like this: load, store, add, store, read from file, something like this. So here actually CPU is involved, right? Whereas whenever you want to do some sort of input output, maybe I say, for example, the last instruction is something like read from file. So read from file means now file handling, where maybe the file is stored on disk and disk is one of the input output device. So maybe DMEA is one of the module of operating system used for that purpose. And now processor is not doing anything during this time. Processor is just waiting for completion of IO. Anyways, our last unit is IO management. That time also we'll see whenever CPU initiates some sort of task, then CPU is just waiting. And whenever that task is finished, this fact is made known to the processor. Maybe two different ways are there. Let us consider right now for simplicity by interrupt. So whenever IO is finished, some sort of interrupt will be fired. So operating system will come to know that IO was finished, and then it will continue with whatever the next instructions are there. So something like store, increment, index, write to file. So again, when you say write to file, again you need to wait for IO. So whenever there is a task for the processor, let us call that as a CPU burst. Okay, it is a CPU burst. Okay, so CPU burst is actually some sort of execution. Some task is there for the CPU. So now talking in terms of read write cycles, there are few cycles where CPU will execute actually few instructions, whereas there are certain times during which CPU just has to wait. For example, when the last instruction executed here is read from file, during this time, during completion of reading from the file, or in second case, when you say write to file, during completion of writing to file. So this is the IO burst, where CPU is not actually doing nothing. CPU is just waiting for completion, right? And whenever there is no task for CPU with respect to this process, now this part is important. Here, wait for IO, we never know how much time is required here. For example, if I assume like for this CPU bus, say 10 milliseconds are sufficient. For this IO, I don't know how much time is required. Now, if I again consider say 100 milliseconds are required. So 10 millisecond CPU burst, 100 millisecond IO burst. Again, maybe 10 millisecond is there for CPU burst and 100 millisecond is for IO burst. Meaning of that is CPU is executing 10 millisecond, waiting 100 millisecond. Next, again executing for 10 millisecond, again waiting for 100 milliseconds. Now this waiting time, 100 millisecond, can be utilized by switching from this process, because only this process is waiting for completion of IO. Maybe other processes in my system are ready for execution. They are ready to run. They are in the ready queue. So rather than just waiting for completion of this IO, during these 100 milliseconds, it is possible we can schedule or we can select another process for execution so that we'll get the maximum utilization of CPU. This maximum CPU utilization is important. So rather than just wasting these cycles for waiting for IO completion, okay, it is possible to. Now, nature of process we don't know, because most of the time, maybe few processes are more on having lots of IO, few processes have less IO, and CPU bursts more. But most of the time, if you have some sort of interactive kind of application, in that case, it is usually the mixture of CPU as well as IO burst, right? So it is mix of CPU and IO burst. That is what is mentioned here. It is now mix of CPU burst and also IO burst. Like for example, in this diagram, you can see 1, 2, 3 CPU bursts are there and 1, 2, 3 IO bursts are there. Of course, it is just part of the program, but it is mixture of both, right? So, is it okay, the CPU burst and IO burst? Now let us move to the next part. Here you can check the histogram of CPU burst time. Okay. So in this diagram you can see like CPU burst is for very less amount of time here, for example. Now if I consider this as somewhere here, where this is the peak for the CPU burst, it is if I say this is something like around 3, so 3/3 millisecond, time starts with 0. You can imagine like this as a logical time. So at third, it reaches highest, slowly it goes down, and maybe somewhere here up to 8. So imagine something like it is around 5, right? So for 5 milliseconds, there is task for the CPU, and then here, no, CPU is actually idle, waiting for something. So the thing is, CPU burst time is usually, anyways, we cannot always say like this. For that, maybe you need to write a small program. Say, for example, let me tell you example on this. Suppose there is one program and which displays odd numbers between 1 lakh and 2 lakh. Now try to understand this example. Write a simple, say C program, C++, doesn't matter. Let us assume C program. Write a simple C program to display odd numbers between 1 lakh to 2 lakh. Now, maybe I'll write a simple for loop for I is equal to 1 lakh, I is less than equal to 2 lakh, I plus plus. If I mod 2 equals 1, that is the odd number, just print it. Now, if you imagine the operation, it is just kind of a division. Even this part is also not required, right? If I start, because if I know the first odd number, something like 1 lakh and 1, so I'll start my loop with something like, for I is equal to 1 lakh and 1, I is less than 2 lakhs, and rather than saying I plus plus, I can put I is equal to I plus 2. Because every alternate number, it is like odd, even, odd, even, odd, even, odd, even, something like that. And there is no computation at all now in the loop. we are just displaying the value of I. So something like printf I. If you try to execute this code, now do one thing, open the, like in Windows, when you press Control, Alt, Delete, you get the task manager. And from that, one of the tab is performance, and see the utilization of CPU. You, of course, it also again depends on what other applications are running. But now assuming that say average applications are there and mainly your program is executing maybe for some amount of time, whatever the time is, okay, maybe a few seconds also. Now, if you see the CPU utilization time, it is hardly utilizing CPU. Like I checked, you never goes like say above 10% of CPU utilization, right? Why? Because there is no computation actually. Computation is very simple. I already initialize I. Only one thing is executing after each and every loop, and that is I is equal to I plus 2. Simple addition is the computation. And I am just checking the value with whether it is less than something like 2 lakh, right? And then display. And because we are displaying, or maybe you are writing it to a file, definitely that becomes slow as compared to the CPU. Because IO devices are very slow as compared to the CPU. Now, if I modify the same program rather than displaying odd numbers, now this time write a program to display prime numbers between 1 lakh and 2 lakh. I want now prime numbers. So now deciding on whether 1 lakh and 1, whether it is prime or not, we need to do lots of divisions, right? And now for this, now try to compare both, displaying odd numbers and displaying prime numbers between the range 1 lakh and 2 lakh. Definitely for prime number part, you will get the CPU utilization above 80%. That is what the CPU burst time is. Where lots of time CPU is using for actual computation. That is what the CPU burst time. Whereas in previous example, we are just incrementing it, checking it, and then displaying it. So increment, check, display, increment, check, display. So burst time is very less. Considering slow input-output devices. Got it? So this histogram tells you the CPU burst time is usually very less. Now let us move to the CPU scheduler. As I already mentioned in poll, this is kind of short-term scheduler. And because this is short-term scheduler, if you remember the diagram, short-term scheduler is between the state, you can imagine something like ready queue and running. It is in between that. Whenever we say running, that means actually CPU is assigned to that process. And whenever we say ready queue, the processes that are ready will be selected by CPU scheduler for next execution. Okay. So this is the short-term scheduler, which will select the process from the ready queue and it allocates the CPU. Okay. Now, whatever your ready queue is there, now that could be ordered in many different ways, depending upon the type of operating system. And now whatever those techniques are there, they are actually called as scheduling algorithms. Okay. Now the question is, when we need to invoke this CPU scheduler or this short-term scheduler, because one process is already running there, right? One process is running. If that process is finished, that means whatever the current running process is completes whatever task assigned to that, that means it is terminated, right? Then definitely we need to select next process for execution. So this is one of the event I can say or incidents where we need to invoke this short-term scheduler, right? So this is what I exactly mentioned is condition number 4, whenever current process gets terminated. Now next one is, maybe for example, whatever my currently running process is there, that is waiting for some sort of IO. In previous slide I already mentioned there is a CPU burst and then IO burst, and maybe because of IO burst that process is removed from running state and now it will be waiting. We already saw different states like newly created, then ready, then running, then waiting. Okay. Now current process which is running goes in waiting state because of some sort of IO or maybe some sort of event. Rather than wasting the CPU cycles, it is better to select another process for execution. That is what the case number 1. So whenever current process switches from running to waiting state, then yes, we can invoke this short-term scheduler so that our next process will be selected for execution. So these are two normal things. Now number 2nd and 3rd, if you see, whenever current process switches from running to ready. Now the question is, why process will switch from running to ready? Now again, if you remember the process state transition diagram, there is one arrow from running state to ready state, and the transition is named as interrupt. Now what is that interrupt? Yes, somebody mentioned that interrupt on chart. Yes, interruption. Now what is reason behind interruption? Two obvious reasons I can mention. One is, for example, if it is a time sharing kind of operating system where each and every process is assigned some fixed time quantum, say few milliseconds. If that time quantum is finished, now such running process will be interrupted and that goes back to ready. When it goes back to ready, now short-term scheduler will select next process for execution. Kind of round robin. Anyways, we are going to see that. So this is case number 2, where current process switches from running to ready. So one thing I mentioned is maybe something like time quantum. Okay. Another situation for the second category is, yes, higher priority processes. So for example, if we have something called as a priority based scheduling, okay, and a process with higher priority than currently running process is maybe created or maybe it is available in the ready queue, then we need to select higher priority process. So lower priority process may be interrupted, right? So two reasons for the interrupt. Okay. And third thing mentioned is when current process switches from waiting to ready. Now previously my process was waiting for some sort of IO burst, and that IO burst is finished. Now process becomes ready. Maybe few operating system utilize this incident also for activating short-term scheduler. Okay, so this one is the third case. So the scheduling decisions that can be taken. Okay, four possibilities. Now out of these four, now first one and fourth one is called as non-preemptive. Non-preemptive, where meaning of this is because current process cannot continue. Why it cannot continue? It is waiting for IO, or that has already finished whatever task assigned to that process. In either case, current process cannot continue its execution. So we are not forcefully stopping, right? Even you can say current process voluntarily releases control of CPU. So this is non-preemptive. It is not forceful suspension of execution. No, it is voluntary. Whereas case number 2 and 3, this is called as preemptive, because in case number 2 and 3, remember, the running process is moving to, like in case number 2, it is to ready state. Why ready? Maybe higher priority process or time quantum. So it is actually preempted forcefully. Whereas in third case, when other process becoming ready, so it is switching from waiting to ready, that means again it forcefully suspending execution of current process. Suspending, I think it is wrong word. Actually, the preemption is the correct word for that. Okay. So that is preemptive. Now, whenever it is a preemptive, you need to think of different things. For example, what about access to shared data? Okay. So process, say 2-3 processes are there and they are sharing the same data, and one of the processes is preempted. What to do about that shared data? Whether others are allowed or they have also need to be preempted. What about preemption while in the kernel mode? Most of the operating system do not allow this. For example, in user space, you executed some sort of say opening a file. Now opening a file needs the system call, and system call actually calling the device drivers for that type of whatever the hardware, storage hardware is there, and all that code has to be executed in privileged mode, and privileged mode is nothing but the kernel mode. If process is already in the kernel mode, whether you want to allow the preemption, whether you will stop the execution of that process. Okay. Now you imagine like that as a critical situation, right? Even third case is like interrupts occurring during crucial OS activities. Some sort of critical activities are being carried out by operating system, and interrupt occurs so that whatever that process is executing, that has to be preempted. So operating system has to take care under these three circumstances: how to deal with shared data, what about preemption in the kernel mode, or what about interrupting the current process whenever operating system is doing some sort of crucial activities. So again, I can say answer to these questions are not straightforward. It all depends on whatever the design strategy selected by operating system, depends on that. For example, preemption in the kernel mode is not allowed. Of course, you can allow it, no doubt. But we need more than one context switching there. One is from kernel mode to user mode, and then from one process to other process. Okay, so that is the things you need to consider. Next is the dispatcher. Now dispatcher module. Now two things. One thing is the scheduler, and next one is the dispatcher. Okay. Now the dispatcher module. This gives control of the CPU to the process. That means first upon, scheduler has to select the process for execution. Rather, I can say scheduler will select the next process for execution. Now, actually, CPU needs to be allocated to the selected process. So that module of operating system is called as a dispatch. So this word is again important because there is something called as a dispatch latency also. Anyways, that also we'll see. But whenever we want to make use of dispatcher to give control of CPU, we know that we need to have context switching. In context switching, we have already discussed. We need to save the context of current process. We need to load the context of selected process by the scheduler. And once that is done, maybe again we need to go back to the user mode because context switching takes place in kernel mode. And then we need to jump to the proper location. And just jumping to proper location is nothing but loading the program counter. With each, whenever we load the context of process, one of the part of context is whatever the states of registers, and one of the important register is program counter PC. Once that is loaded, then wherever we stop earlier, from that execution will take place. So these are the tasks involved in the dispatcher mode. Okay, context switching, switching to user mode, and jumping to the proper location. So this is related to program counter. And whatever these states are there, they are dealing with handling memory. Definitely it will take some time. Maybe it is a short time, but definitely that time is there. Okay. So say at time T1, scheduler selects next process for execution. The next process which is selected by scheduler will start its execution at time T2. So at this moment, say for example, this is timeline, and at this moment process is selected by scheduler, and at this time actual execution of that process begins. Now whatever the time in between these two is required by the dispatcher module, and this time is called as dispatch latency. This is the dispatch latency. So talking in terms of its definition, dispatch latency is the time it takes for the dispatcher to stop one process and start another process. It is exactly same like your context switching, right? Which involves at least two memory read-write operations. One is save context of current process, load context of selected process, which is selected by the scheduler. Okay, and loading is like, then fine, maybe you need to load the program counter also. Whatever different registers are there, they will be loaded. So whenever it is a scheduling algorithm, we need to consider the time required for dispatcher module also. So we need to consider the dispatch latency also. I think I already mentioned this example whenever I talked about round robin, right? Like some amount of time, say X amount of time is, there is a X amount of time is, let us consider this a time slice or time quantum in which the process is actually executing, and after X amount of time we need to switch to the next process. Okay, and suppose this dispatch latency is Y. Now what will happen if X is less than Y? Meaning is we are executing for say 2 milliseconds and dispatch latency is say for example 5 milliseconds. So we are just executing for 2 milliseconds and we are wasting 5 milliseconds to switch from one process to other. Again we execute for 2 milliseconds, again we'll waste for 5. This is wrong design. So while designing scheduling algorithm, we need to keep in mind dispatch latency also. Okay. Now let us move to the next. Now what are the different scheduling criteria? So these criteria are actually used to evaluate the scheduling algorithms. Now first criteria is, while designing scheduling algorithm, we should keep in mind that we should utilize CPU as much as possible. So we need to keep the CPU busy, like rather than wasting time for waiting in IO bus, during that time it is better to execute some other task, right? Uh, for example, a very practical example, say for example, uh, think yourself as the processor, so your time is crucial. And suppose for example in your house you have say washing machine and you load the clothes in it, and say multiple programs are there. Assume that you started the program for say 45 minutes, meaning of that is washing machine will take 45 minutes to complete whatever the load you given there to wash the clothes actually, right? Now once you load it, now your task is over, you are free to do something else, no? Or you will wait there for 45 minutes. No, during these 45 minutes, definitely you are doing some other task. So you are not wasting your time. So you are keeping yourself as busy as possible so that tasks can be finished simultaneously, right? Exactly same thing happens. For example, in case of IO transfer, maybe DMA controllers are there. They are actually doing some sort of input output. Processor is free during that time. Don't just waste that time waiting. During that time we do something else, some other task, some other process. So scheduling criteria, first one is CPU utilization. Okay. Next one is throughput. Now throughput is something you need to understand. Number of processes that complete their execution per time unit. Now what is this time unit? Is it 1 second, 1 hour, 1 day? Whatever it is, whatever the time unit you decide, during or maybe within that time, how many processes have finished their execution? That is what throughput is. It is not how many processes scheduled, no, how many processes finished, they completed their execution. That is what throughput. So scheduling criteria should give more throughput. Very simple thing. If I say time is 1 minute, and there are 100 processes. Applying one scheduling algorithm, 10 processes will finish. Applying other, maybe 20 processes will finish. Definitely, I can say the second algorithm is better than first one because it is giving more throughput, right? Next one is the turnaround time. Turnaround time, this is the amount of time to execute a particular process. Now, whenever we select a process, as I mentioned, it is mixture of CPU burst and IO burst. How much time is required by that process, whatever in terms of the time unit we decide, it varies actually. For example, display prime numbers between 1 lakh and 2 lakh and display prime numbers between 1 lakh and 5 lakh. Now looking at its input itself, we definitely say that the process who displays prime number between 1 lakh to 5 lakh definitely will take more time. And interestingly, in your system, in your operating system, your process is not only process which is executing. There are other processes also, right? So if scheduler have not selected your process, it is just waiting. So turnaround time is actually both time spent executing plus time spent or amount of time spent waiting in the ready queue. Now, when you say waiting time, there is always kind of a confusion because next term is waiting time itself. Say for example, let us talk about waiting time. Now, if my process is waiting for some sort of input output, no, don't count that as a waiting time. Okay, waiting time is what? Process is ready. It has all the resources required for execution. Only thing is CPU is not there. Okay, so this is the amount of time spent by the process in ready queue. Don't forget this. It is not in the waiting queue. Try to understand this. Process spend time in ready queue. Now, if it is waiting for some sort of input and output, no, it is not problem of scheduling algorithm. It is nature of that process. Maybe lots of input output is required. Maybe that process is waiting on some sort of other process. It is not fault of scheduling algorithm, right? But if process is spending more time in the ready queue, maybe it is not selected, then it is problem of scheduling algorithm, right? So this is one of the scheduling criteria, waiting time. So now turnaround time includes waiting time also. So turnaround time, I can say the execution time. Execution time is something like the time process spent in running state. Process is running for some amount of time, plus process is spending time in ready queue, waiting for the scheduler to be selected by the scheduler. That is waiting time. So addition of both, I can say it is turnaround time. Okay. And last criteria is the response time. Now, response time and again the turnaround time you need to compare. Turnaround time, process will be totally finished. Okay. So for example, on a timeline, suppose this is my timeline, and my process, for example, arrived in the system at this point, somewhere here, at time say 2, At time 6, it is selected by scheduler. Now process is executing for say 3 milliseconds, so from 6 to 9. Again, maybe scheduler selected another, so it is again waiting in the ready queue. So that is the waiting time. Okay. Now at some, say for example, somewhere here at 17 process finished. Now turnaround time, I can say it started from second and finished at 17. So 17 minus 2, 15 is the turnaround time. It includes everything, execution time also, waiting time also. Whereas what is response time? This is the amount of time it takes. This time is from when a request was submitted. For example, at the time 2, here request was submitted, until the first response is produced. And first response necessarily is not output. It could be anything, first response. For example, if my program is something like reading something, some two numbers are taken as an input, and maybe something like, so printf enter two numbers is my first statement. So between 6 and 9 at a time, say for example at time 7, I got something like my process selected at 6, and at time 7 I got first response, enter two numbers. I'm just mentioning example. So that was the first response I got, right? So typically this response time is required for time sharing environment. We usually say quick response time. I need quick response time. So at time 7, so I submitted at 2 and I got first response at 7. So my response time is 5. Whereas my turnaround time is 15. Right? So that is what the response time is. Right. Do you have any questions here? Any questions on this? Fine. Now I want to open a small poll on this. And this poll is related to, let me ask first of all for CPU utilization. CPU utilization, we expect what? So my scheduling algorithm anyways, this will be for all. So I asked the question there, CPU utilization, it should be max or min? Last 15 seconds. 70 of 90 attendees have responded at 72, 73. Last 2 seconds. Yes, finished. So 74 have responded. And interestingly, now see the result, I just published it. Interestingly, still 17 students are saying it should be mean. How it should be mean? We want to keep the CPU as busy as possible. That is the maximum CPU utilization. Okay, so the correct answer is max. It should be max, right? Now, regarding yes, respond to this one. What is your opinion about throughput? The value of throughput must be max or min. You just need to select one, max or min. That's it. I don't think lots of time is required, but still I am giving around 1 minute. So last 15 seconds. See again here the result. Throughput is what? Or the slide is in front of you, I guess, right? It is number of processes that complete. So definitely it should be max, no? But still 34 students are saying out of 90, 38%. They are saying throughput should be minimum. Or how it could be minimum? It should be max. Maximum throughput means more number of processes have finished their execution, right? Now let us try for this turnaround time. It should be more or less, max or min. This is the amount of time to execute a particular process. I can see at least 18 participants are there. They are not at all responding. I don't know what is the reason. Last 15 seconds. This time I guess it is better. Just 12 are remaining. 10 are remaining. 11. Now see the result. 72% saying turnaround time should be min. Correct. Meaning of that is the process should finish earlier. Now respond to this one. What do you think about response time? In terms of quantity, it should be minimum or maximum. Last 15 seconds. Okay, now see the result. 66% students saying it should be minimum. That is what the quick response time. I don't know why still 20% students are saying response time must be max. Maximum response time. A maximum response time means you will not get response quickly. As simple as like that. Right? And what do you think about this criteria, waiting time? Whether it should be max or mean? Still 21 student has to respond. So last 15 seconds. That's it. These are the results. So 76% students saying yes, waiting time should be minimum. That is the correct answer. So we should get max CPU utilization, max throughput, minimum turnaround time, minimum waiting time, and minimum response time. These are the optimization criteria. These are the optimization criteria, right? Okay. So now we stop today. Let me check. Anything is there on chat? No, there is no problem. Do you have any question? Please ask. Otherwise, we'll stop today's lecture. Any question? Fine. So we'll stop here.